All right, welcome back to a little Seahawks talk. I am your boy, Seahawk boy, Mike Barrow, with you here today to talk a little Seahawks week one free agency review. What did they do? Who did they take? Who did they let go? Who did they bring in? There's been a ton of activity. Let's settle in and talk about it. All right, guys, it's been a wild first week of free agency for the Seattle Seahawks. That doesn't happen very often. There's been a ton of activity, a ton of moves by John Schneider and the Seahawks Brain Trust. And it really has been, really quite unusual to have this much activity in the first couple of days of free agency. And it actually started, as I'm sure everybody knows by now, it actually started a couple of days before the free agency period when the Seahawks traded quarterback Geno Smith and wide receiver DK Metcalf. Now, look, if you recall, you may remember that that yours truly, Seahawk boy Mike Barra, who was 2 years ahead of the curve on firing Pete Carroll, actually 4 years ahead of the curve by the time it came out, on firing Pete Carroll, that Pete Carroll was the problem. They were never going to get anything fixed until they got rid of Pete, who told you that this team's number one need was the quarterback position. They needed to do something about it serious for the long term. They needed to take some chances on some young players. They refused to do that and got all kinds of flack for it. I told people, hey, Aaron Rodgers is better than Geno Smith, which is objectively true. And Sam Darnold is better than Geno Smith, which is objectively true, and caught all kinds of flack. Well, guess what? It turns out now that the Seattle Seahawks apparently agree with me. They don't agree with Seahawks retard Nelson. They don't agree with Dan Veens. They don't agree with Brian Numskuller. And they don't even really agree with Rob Staten, who criticized me for my approach on many occasions, rather viciously, too. Let's be honest. Now, look, I like Rob. I like his analysis. I think it's generally about right about 80% of the time, but there's a 20% that he just won't go there. He won't criticize the organization. I think he's angling for credentials as a Seahawks reporter, which he should get. He is the best Seahawks reporter out there, but just because he's the best doesn't make him good, and nor does it make him perfect. So, he gave me a hard time when I suggested they maybe should trade Leonard Williams. He called me stupid. Well, it's not stupid. What I was saying and what I've maintained all along is the Seahawks seem to think that they're contenders. If they think they're contenders, then there are several things they should do. They should re-sign veterans like Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed and Ernest Jones. They should bring those guys back because the defense made improvement. They should go out and get a better quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or Sam Darnold or any number of young guys if they were going to stick with Geno. They should seriously consider bringing in some new offensive linemen and spend the money in free agency. Well, the Seahawks kind of agreed with me on some of that and didn't agree with me on other parts of it. The other alternative plan was, look, if you're not a contender, admit it to yourself. Trade for a young quarterback, draft a young quarterback, take the team down to the studs, and move on from there. Now, trading Leonard Williams would have been part of that. Given the market that's out there, I think they could have gotten a second or at worst a third for Leonard Williams after giving up a second for him a couple years ago when they thought they were contenders under Pete Carroll. They could have done really, really well with getting more draft picks. The next thing to do is get rid of Geno, trade him, cut him, whatever. I suggest you just cut him and take the money and spend it on other parts of the team. And trade DK Metcalf. Well, it turns out they agree with me on half of it. They didn't agree with me on the other half. Now, here's what I think went on at the Seahawks headquarters. A little bit of whiskey. It's good stuff. Here's what I think went on. I think that they thought they were contenders. They're not contenders. They're not. They haven't been serious contenders. I think they thought they were, and I think they thought they could contend with Geno, but they weren't willing to overcommit to Geno, which was at least one of the few smart things that they did. Um, so they re-signed Leonard Williams, restructured him, kept him. They were of two minds on this. But when push came to shove right before free agency, they sat down. They were, again, kind of non-committal on Geno, sat down, talked to him. He wanted ridiculous coin. He didn't want to be in Seattle. So they traded him to that sucker, Pete Carroll, here in my hometown of Las Vegas, where I live now. The Geno Smith experience is coming to Las Vegas, guys, along with Pete Carroll. And you're going to end up hating him just as much as half of Seahawkdom did by the end of his tenure in Seattle. Now, again, I've been forced into a corner. Rob and others have criticized me for focusing solely on Geno and on the quarterback position, overly focusing on it, they said, and criticizing him. But again, the Geno stands, the Geno bros, the insane wing of Seahawks Twitter tried to sell this guy as a Hall of Famer, tried to sell this guy as a superstar. He never was. Geno is the 15th to 20th best quarterback in this league. He's the best of the guys that just aren't good enough. He's in the Kirk Cousins category. The guys who are never going to be good enough, the guys who can't make big plays in big moments in big games. But he can do everything else. He'll get you 9 wins. He'll get you 10 wins, assuming there's a, week 18 exhibition game like the Seahawks had this year, where he padded his stats to 21 touchdowns. So they kind of decided that he wasn't worth the trouble. They'd rather have the cap space, but there's no point in having the cap space if you don't spend it. But at any rate, they moved him on, which was the right thing to do and actually should have been done a few years ago. Probably should have been done last year. They should have moved up to the number 1 pick in 2023, which they could easily do. I don't care what anybody says. They could have easily done. Taken CJ Stroud, who was my QB1, and Rob Staten's QB1, by the way, and played Geno as a starter and then moved on to CJ Stroud by now. But they didn't do that. They sacrificed a couple of years of mediocrity. But the advantage of Geno being so demanding and forcing his way out was that it allowed the Seahawks, forced them basically to take action at the quarterback position. So they did. And I assure you, at the Combine a week or so ago, that they had discussions with Sam Darnold's agent, and they found out that he was amenable to coming to Seattle. I didn't think we could get him. I thought he'd be too expensive. I never thought the Seahawks would spend the kind of money it was going to take to get Sam Darnold. Fortunately, Sam Darnold had major breakdowns on the offensive line when he was with the Vikings, and they had a bad playoff game, and that soured some people on Darnold. I don't know why, because the real Sam Darnold is the guy who beat the Seahawks in Week 16, played great all year long when he had a little bit of help on the OL. In the playoffs, he didn't. Now, that's the same excuse everybody says you use for Geno Smith, but there's a big difference. We don't know yet if Darnold is a choker in the big moments. We know Geno Smith is. We know Geno Smith is never going to be good enough to win a Super Bowl or even get to a Super Bowl. We don't know that about Sam Darnold. So we saved money. We swapped like for like. There are people saying this is a lateral move. We don't know the details of his contract yet, but it's 3 years, $105 million. And the Seahawks appears they can get out of it after year 2. So that was a huge move. It is a major upgrade. Darnold had 35 touchdowns. Geno only had 17. Don't give me this 21 touchdown shit. He didn't have 21. He had 17 touchdowns in the 16 games that mattered and 15 interceptions. A 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. And again, I'm going to tell you again, there's the 2 most critical stats you look at with quarterbacks are how many touchdowns do they throw and what's their touchdown to interception ratio. Geno's was 1-1. Geno's has continued to decline for the second straight year. And at 35, he's not going to get any better. Darnold, 35 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, better than 2-1. And 2-1 isn't that bad if you throw 35 to 40 touchdowns. 2-1 is really bad if you only throw 20 touchdowns. It's not very good. So the reality is the Seahawks upgraded at quarterback. He's 27 years old. They got younger. They have a guy who played great last year with some really good talent around him. And now their job is to build that talent around him. They also re-signed Ernest Jones. They re-signed Jaron Reed, two guys they need to keep that 15th ranked or so defense in the middle of the pack. Maybe they can move to the upper middle of the pack with the draft this year if they get lucky, if they do better than they usually do. That would be exciting. But the job that remains to be done is on, obviously, the offensive side of the ball. So what did they do on the offensive side of the ball? Well, they did not go out and get an offensive lineman. They missed on Kevin Zeitler. They missed on Fries, who was their number one target. They didn't get it done, and John Schneider said, we just didn't get it done, which is kind of wearing thin. But let's see what John Schneider had to say about this, as a matter of fact, today. He basically said, Michael Sean Dugar reported that he says he empathizes with Seahawks fans who badly wanted him to address, let's see if we can get this, who badly wanted him to address the offensive line. But he said they tried and it didn't work out. And that doesn't mean he's going to pivot and throw money at lesser players. Well, the reality is that this is what he says every year about the quarterback situation, too. Here's a story from the New York Times. It says, does that mean you start panicking and throwing money at other guys that aren't quite as good? No, Schneider said. You make the smart, patient decisions. We've made decisions in the past that haven't been the best decisions for the organization because we weren't patient and we panicked. And we pay for that. Really? Because I think you just sit on your hands and do nothing 90% of the time the last 10 years. Schneider said Seattle is still working on acquiring a veteran offensive lineman, but also noted that the new offensive line staff likes the young players on the roster. McDonald also said, although they're pursuing veteran free agents and scouting draft prospects, they expect their returning offensive linemen to improve and contribute in 2025, thanks to their new offensive line coach, John Benton. That's interesting stuff, but again, it's a little disingenuous. Now, the one guy that they seem to be still looking at, according to Corbin Smith, is the Bears' Tevin Jenkins. Now, the Bears didn't try to re-sign Tevin Jenkins because they didn't think he was that good. They tried to replace him. And they had a poor offensive line last year, too. But at least he's a veteran who can be plugged into the left guard spot, I suppose, and give the Seahawks something more than Tomlinson did last year. So this could set up a very interesting draft situation. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But one of the things they did do is they went out and they got Marquez Valdez-Scantling, because they also released Tyler Lockett. They traded DK Metcalf. They only got a second-round pick for him. That's probably about as good as you're going to do for DK. I was thinking maybe they were going to get a second and a fifth. They didn't quite get there. But, let's look at some highlights. Beautiful catch in the corner. Great throw. Let's watch this. Here's the throw from Spencer Rattler. Look at the perfection of that, the on-time aspect of it. Now, the NFL, believe it or not, ruled that this was not a catch. Possession, 1 foot down, 2 feet down, and then the guy pulls the ball out on the ground, and they said, no, it's not a touchdown. That cost him $250,000. What a ripoff. Here's some more Marquez Valdez-Scantling when he was with the Saints, also against the Browns.
Situation we're in the game. Throw down and one, Carr complete.
Stearns runs up field. He's 31 years old, but he can still run.
The 20,
in fact, he may not be DK Metcalf.
71 yards.
He may not be DK Metcalf, but he's a lot faster than, as a for instance, Tyler Lockett. So I think Valdez Scantling probably comes in as the wide receiver 2, and then they're going to have to draft a guy. So that's obviously going to be very, very important. Um, Tevin Jenkins, if they were to sign him, I'd be fine. But overall, so far, when you look at what the Seahawks have done, they got the top free agent out there, Sam Darnold. He was ranked number 1 by most people. He had a great year last year. They moved on from the quarterback situation. Now, what I'm interested in the quarterback situation is they still need to get a young guy training behind Darnold. Who might that be? Well, I'm hoping that the new regime in New Orleans doesn't want Spencer Rattler, because as Rob Staten really loved him last year, I really loved him too. Go trade for him. You could probably get him for a 4th, because they paid a 5th for him. So I would love to have Rattler behind Darnold. If not, you're going to have to draft a guy this year. And we've got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. We have a chance to get 3 or 4, or if we're lucky, 5 starters out of that. It would be a shame if we had to spend one of those picks on a quarterback. And we should, because we still need a young quarterback. Darnold signed a 3-year deal. He'll probably be here for a bit longer than that. He's an upgrade from Geno Smith, but the reality is you still need to have that young guy coming in behind him that might be better. So I'd be happy to trade 5th round pick for Spencer Rattler. The new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, worked with him in New Orleans. I'm hoping that's a draft day deal that we can do, or even slightly before the draft. If not, we have to spend one of those top 5 picks on a quarterback. Probably one of the 2nd round picks. Somebody like Quinn Ewers, who is my favorite out of the 2nd round guys. Jackson Dart. He may go high, though. He may go number 1. So this enables the Seahawks to move into the draft with the idea that, okay, well, we're going to take an offensive lineman. Now, everybody loves Tyler Booker. There's some other guys out there. Let's kind of wait and see what happens there. If you look at, though, some other things, sorry, so there's a few other things they did. They signed a linebacker and picked up a couple of other guys just to fill some holes on the roster. So as you look at the Seahawks coming into this season, to me, what are the needs? Offensive line is the number 1 need. This is an extremely deep defensive tackle class. So it seems to me you need to get one of those fairly high, because if you spend a 3rd round pick on a defensive tackle, he's going to be a guy that was a 2nd round talent last year, or even a late 1st round talent. I don't want to remind you, but I do. Braden Fisk was a 2nd round pick. So you might be able to get a Braden Fisk level guy in the 3rd round. That would be pretty phenomenal. In addition to that, the Seahawks got good news on the compensatory pick front, where they picked up a 4th, a 5th, 2 5ths. So they're in good shape draft-wise. They could still trade down. We'll see what happens. So as I look at the needs, I think offensive line, obviously wide receiver, because now we have to replace DK Metcalf, and Valdez Scantling's good, but what if he gets injured? Probably have to take 2 receivers in this draft, maybe trade for another veteran, one of our lower picks. Quarterback remains. The young quarterback of the future remains an issue. What are we going to do about that? Are we going to draft one, or are we going to trade for Spencer Rattler or somebody like that? Will Levis before the draft to bring up behind Sam Darnold, somebody who has time. And by the way, before you rip on me about Will Levis, guys, be serious, okay? He started 20 games. His stats are comparable after 20 games to Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, guys like that. Josh Allen, his stats are about the same. So you cannot give up on a young quarterback after 20 games. If the Titans want to do that, this is one of the reasons why the Titans are always in the top 10. All right, speaking of pivoting, let's go pivot over to look at a mock draft real quick and see what we could do about filling the remaining roster spots. Oh, but there is one thing I do want to point out. There is one thing I do want to point out. Let me go back over here. Um, and okay, well, we're still running that. Let's go around and click on the opera window. I just want to remind everybody because I put this out. Just want to remind you my checklist versus what the Seahawks have done. So here we are. All right, number one on my priority list was fire Pete Carroll. Check, they did that. Gino isn't good enough. Get rid of him. Check, they did that. Draft a young quarterback high. I think coming finally soon. Get rid of the Deadwood, Gino, Draymond Jones, George Fant, Lockett, Harris, DK. Check, they did that. Byron Murphy is not an impact player, and I'm going to stand by that. That's why I think it's important that we get a defensive tackle in this draft, because I really, really do think that Byron Murphy's not good enough. And I think that we're going to definitely have to adapt. Definitely have to adapt to let's go over to the mock draft simulator. We're definitely going to have to adapt to that fact and get ourselves a defensive tackle in a draft that is loaded with them. Okay, let me just double check what we're showing here. Let's slide over to the Pro Football Network draft simulator, mock draft simulator, and take a quick look at what we would do as the Seahawks. All right, we're going to set it for 3 rounds. We're going to go fast. We're going to pick the Seahawks as our team, and we're just going to go through this and look at, from our current situation, what we're going to do. Okay, we're sitting at pick 18. We're being offered 38 and 69 by the Patriots. That's not good enough. We're being offered 28 and a second in 2026 by the Bengals. I don't know if I'm inclined to do that. Let's think about that. And the 49ers are desperate. We're not making a deal with them. All right, let's hide. So here's the thing that I'm thinking about. What happens if Shadur Sanders makes it past Colorado? Or sorry, the Saints, makes it past the Raiders? What if he makes it in the 12 to 14 to 15 range? What if he makes it into a range where we could trade a first and a third and get up and get him? I think if that opportunity presents itself, you have to do it. I think you have to do it. It doesn't work out in this particular scenario, but I think you should do it because quarterback remains the most important position in the NFL, and Sanders and Darnold will give us a really great quarterback room and a chance to play for Super Bowls in the future. But in this particular scenario, it didn't work out that way. Now, Tyler Booker, our number one target, is off the board. So what do we do? Do we take a wide receiver? Do we take a defensive tackle? Do we take a different quarterback? Or do we take an offensive lineman? I, again, think we go to the offensive line. He's a little bit highly rated, but you've got Tate Ratledge and Gray Zabel on the board. Left guard, if we sign Tevin Jenkins, this is probably not as important, but the top guards left, according to some of the best people out there that I respect, are Ratledge and Zabel. Let's just take Zabel. We're going to lose Ekeba. All right. We're being offered a second by Baltimore in 2026. Nope. We're being offered to drop. No, we're going to stay with our pick at 50. All right. Again, let's take a look at who's off the board. We missed Emeka Egbuka, who I would like to have teamed with Jackson Smith-Njigba and Scantling, but that didn't happen. There are several quarterbacks sitting there staring us in the face. But again, I think our biggest challenges are going to come at other positions right now. So let's look at this. We got a Ekaba, Luther Burden, the wide receiver, went. Donovan Jackson went. Xavier Respeto. Okay. Walter Nolan, Landon Jackson. I'm going to look at the wide receivers here. Did the Ole Miss wide receiver go? Where is he? Yeah, Trey Harris. That was the guy I liked. So if we're going to get Trey Harris, we might have to move up and get him. But here's the reality. We're sitting at 50. We need to get a wide receiver. Isaiah Bond is 5'10". No, I don't want any more D. Eskridges. Jaden Higgins is 6'4", 214. Impressive size, reliable hands. All right, we're going to take a receiver here to fill our receiver spot. Now, pick 52. The Vikings won in. They're offering us a bunch of crap next year. Nope. Giants are offering us pick 65 and pick 99. 65. It's the first pick in the third round. Pick number 65. Pick number 65. Who's going to be there? Do I want to take that deal? I get 65 and 99. If it was higher than that, it would give us a third rounder. Look, here's what I want to spin to. I want to spin to a quarterback. There's still a bunch of them on the board. I don't think 4 of them are going to go in the next 15 picks. I may be wrong. I'm going to take a chance, and I'm going to take that deal. All right, first pick in the third round. We're being offered trades. Nope, not interested. We're just going to sit here and take Jackson Dart. Now, I think this is ridiculous. I don't think Jackson Dart's going to be there at the first pick in the third round. I think he's going to go in the first round. So I'm going to pretend he's not even there. I do think there's a possibility at 65 we could be looking at Quinn Ewers or Will Howard. Will Howard, a lot of people are moving up on him. They like him. They like how he plays in big games. Same thing with Quinn Ewers. But between the two of them, I would be happy with either one here as our quarterback of the future. But again, and goddamn, we just missed on Tate Ratledge. Wow. If we were sitting at 65 and Tate Ratledge lasted into here, I think I'm flipping another pick and moving up to go jump in front and get Ratledge to go double on the offensive guards. Wow. I would have done that. As it is, look, I got to be honest. Dart's not going to be there. I like Ewers. I've liked Ewers since last year. I say bring him in and let him learn behind Sam Darnold. So we go through. We're sitting here at pick 82. Kansas City's trying to trade with us. We're going to look at the whole thing. Who's the next best offensive tackle or defensive tackle? Alfred Collins, 6'5", 332, more of a nose tackle. Yeah, let's just take him. Mason Taylor, tight end. Nah, we're going to go with Collins, the defensive tackle. It's a rich defensive tackle draft. So we're going to take the best player available. Could we use the safety? Yeah, we could maybe use the safety. Andrew Mukaba's there. We could use an edge. We could also use a tight end. Do I take a tight end here? No, I'm not going to take a tight end. The two safeties are the top-rated guys there. Jared Ivey, 6'5", 274, and flashes an impressive pass rush plan, but his heavy feet limit his ceiling. I don't need another LJ Collier. How about Holland Pierce, an offensive tackle? Can move quite well. He can move laterally, can be exposed at times by quick pitch defenders. Look, our offensive line's a problem. Do we want to go with him or do we want to get a running back? I want to get a running back in this draft. I want to get another wide receiver. We could use a safety, 6'1", 215. 5'11". No, you know what? I'm gonna go with the offensive tackle and have a guy that will be there learning behind Abe Lucas and Charles Cross. We have to start thinking about what are we gonna do to replace Charles Cross in a couple years. Now we get to the 99th pick, our last pick on day 2 of the draft. Do I like any of the tight ends? I like some of these tight ends. Luke Lachey I like, but he's way down there. I'm thinking 4th or 5th round. We're looking at a tight end. I say we go with another wide receiver, Kyron Lacey. Oh, Terrence Ferguson is right there. Athletic tight end, contributed as a receiver and a blocker. Sounds like our type. Kyron Lacey's another big receiver. God, Lacey or Ferguson, like tight end, wide receiver, tight end. Well, we already took a wide receiver, so we'll take a tight end. Nope, we're gonna take Karen Lacey. All right, we could take a tight end there, but I think that's more of a third day thing. So here's how we spun it. We traded down, or we stayed at 18. We took Gray Zabel. Why? Because we needed a left guard really bad. We took a guy maybe 10, 12 picks ahead of where he should be, but that's fine. We got Jaden Higgins, wide receiver in the 2nd round. We got Quinn Ewers, a quarterback from Texas, to lock up our quarterback situation for the future. Alfred Collins, big defensive tackle from Texas. Hopefully he'll be better than the last defensive tackle from Texas that we took. We took Holland Pierce, another offensive tackle, to shore up our offensive line, which continues to be an issue. We took a 2nd wide receiver, Kyron Lacey, instead of a tight end. Not a bad haul. I will happily take it. All right. Again, we're going to do this a million times before the draft actually shows up in another 6 weeks. We're in really good situation. I have to be honest. Overall, I would give the Seahawks so far a B. The only reason they don't get an A is because they haven't signed a quality veteran interior offensive lineman, a center or a guard. If they had done that, they'd get an A. But they got rid of Geno. They got what value that they could for DK. They got a 3rd round pick for Geno. Not only getting Geno off the team, but on top of that, replacing him with Sam Darnold and getting a 3rd round pick. That's an A+ move. But the grade comes down a little bit because they failed to get an interior offensive lineman. Scantling's a good receiver. They're in a good position. Relatively happy about it. I'm relatively happy about it, which is not something you can say very often. So, good move so far for John Schneider. Let's see what happens in the next couple of days over the weekend. Let's see if they get somebody like Tevin Jenkins at a reasonable deal. Let's see if they go find a veteran safety and a veteran linebacker to provide a little depth at those positions. We lost Trey Brown in free agency, so 2021 draft, what a complete disaster. If they'd only had 1 pick and just taken Creed Humphrey, we'd have a lot fewer problems than we have right now. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Thanks for being here. I give it a B so far. The offseason so far is off to a good start. And unless they completely blow this draft, like have Shadur Sanders fall to them at 18 and pass on him, they're going to get a pretty good grade this year. And it's nice to be optimistic for a change. All right, thanks. Love you. See you next time.